thought what we'd do is take a little break. I want you to get up, stretch your legs, maybe have a little drink, walk around for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and meet me back here, okay? You may stand now. A couple of questions. First thing, know the man who did alcohol and hypnosis is not going to have a hangover. You don't have a hangover because hypnosis doesn't dehydrate you. Alcohol hangovers are really based on dehydration. And so whoever asked, no, you don't. But you can give somebody a post-hypnotic suggestion that people would have hangovers, and then they will. If that's what you're into. In fact, you could skip the drunk and just give them a hangover. You know, that's, you know, people can do hangovers as good as they can do the drunk if hangovers is what you're into. Or if you're into a way to get high without hangovers, that's really what your question was. Hypnosis is definitely the way to do it. It's kind of a weird question, but you know, I've got to have the answers to things you don't know about. I've done lots and lots of things with using hypnosis to induce altered states. That, you know, a group of friends of mine and I got together for a reunion. I used to be in a band probably 35 years ago. And we got together, having not seen each other in 25 years. And most of us don't take any drugs anymore, but we thought just for the fun of it, what we did is we all went into trance. And I hypnotized everybody, and we all re-induced the state of being on LSD. And the only difference is, again, you don't have it, you're not hung over the next day, because drugs like LSD really wear you out. And that, after, you know, when you take those kind of drugs, they're very, very hard on your body. When you do it hypnotically, you just get all the good stuff. Although there was one guy in the band, the bass player, who I never got along with that well, so I hypnotized everybody, had them have a wonderful time on that, and I had him have a bad experience. And when he came into me a couple of hours later and goes, well, man, I'm really freaking out. And I went, that's good. Somebody else also asked, what is the concept of DHE, and what's the difference between NLP? First, it looked like it said the difference between MP, which is a government official in England. And so the difference would be DHE works. DHE and NLP differ almost dramatically because neuro-linguistic programming is, I mean, they couldn't be more diametrically opposed. NLP is based on finding things that people do, finding out how they do it unconsciously and installing it in someone else. DHE started because I found out most people, their strategies that they use are sort of unpleasant. That, you know, musicians become highly motivated, but they do it through stress. And so instead of making it so that we did it by finding out what was there and copying it. Instead, we figured they had to come somewhere from some place at some time. So instead, we just started making them up. And instead going inside and thinking of it more like an interior decorator. That instead going inside and putting really wonderful voices inside your head, beautiful pictures, big, lovely things. A lot of people, like when you ask them about their beliefs, they squint. And for a couple of years, I never actually got around, and I finally asked somebody, why are you squinting? And they said, because I'm having trouble seeing the picture. And they made their belief pictures were like only this big. And so they had to go like this to see them. And of course, that doesn't make any sense to me. If you're going to look at something, especially your own beliefs, they should be big and bold so you know what they are, so that if you don't like them, you can do something about it. It's okay, I'm just waiting for you to sit down. I just don't like it when they drop in the middle of a walk. So really the major difference, design human engineering is really about taking all the sounds that you hear, and that's why I asked him if he had the sound effects disc, because I actually have a disc that's full of sounds. It has trumpets and all kinds of things, because you know, and special kind of music, because if you can record a McDonald's hamburger commercial inside your head, the same machinery can be used to motivate yourself. If you hear lovely trumpets going da 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 da, you know, it's kind of hard to be depressed when you have stuff like that in your head. And I play that kind of stuff when I work with people and get them to record things inside their head so that they can use the music and the sounds and all of those things so that example given. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thanks, God. Stuff like that happens for me all the time. You just can't ask for more things. Actually, this next one I'll have to be careful about. It's about ghosts. This next question, it says, what do shamans do, in your opinion, when they call spirits? I misread it, and it said when they call pints. But it's spirits. They started to say, is this really just a case of self-hypnosis? Or are they actually calling on some entity outside of the shaman? And the answer is yes. In my opinion, they're doing all of those things. And even if they don't know it, they are. That I think that everything is alive in its own way, including ideas. That if you think about it, that sometimes, especially some ideas, take on a life of their own inside of you. That, and those can either be good ideas, and sometimes they're not. And this is where people get into trouble. They start having scary thoughts, and then they scare themselves more, and they end up living in fear. Paranoid schizophrenics are a prime example of people who have given life to something inside them. And then they began to ask if that, in fact, are they evoking? And as far as I understand the difference between evoke and invoke, that to evoke means you get something on the outside to act. To invoke means that it comes inside you and acts. And I would say yes to both of those. That to me, I don't think that you can ever believe that something is not the case. That it to me is much more functional to believe that everything is true and act as if it is. But see, I'm a modeler. I don't have to have the right answer. I only have to have the right way. As long as I'm able to succeed at the things I do, if my explanation is wrong, who cares? As long as the explanation allows me to be successful. If when I worked with phobics, if they were still frightened, then I wouldn't like my explanation. But the explanation I use seems to work good enough that I keep getting phobics so they're not afraid. And, but by the same token, when I was working with these people that did natural healing, this is another story. I saw some stuff that I couldn't even come up with an explanation for. There was one guy that made this. We had a lot of people who had been diagnosed very thoroughly as having different disorders. And there was one man who had very, very serious cancer. And they, in fact, told me that he was terminal and that he would die, and that he was going to die soon. Not in 6 months, but probably in the next 60 to 90 days. And they said, and that was an optimistic view. It could be a lot sooner. And, you know, they had x-rays of this guy with big tumors and all this stuff. And this guy came in, and he put his hands on this guy. He went into a totally wacko, altered state. We were measuring them with these things called mind mirrors. And this guy went into a profound altered state, and after he did that, then he stopped. But we also had a mind mirror on the guy that he was quote-unquote healing. And that guy went into a profound altered state, which was identical. I mean, when you measure these things, mind mirrors actually measure the magnetic resonance on the brain. And they have little lights, and there's 16 on either side, because it measures the hemispheres differently. And it formed kind of like a bell curve on the visual graph. And this guy formed a bell curve, and then it just moved down into a deeper and deeper state until it got all the way down into very low epsilon states. This is below the meditative states, which are like deep alpha. This is like down in the basement, rummaging around in old boxes. And this guy went into the state, and then all of a sudden he stopped. But the other guy stayed in the state for probably 20 minutes. The guy just sat there like this, and then they took him in the other room, and they took x-rays, and the tumors were gone. And I have no explanation for that. I just think it's really cool because the doctors totally freaked out. And they just came out and they went, "What happened?" And the guy said, "I healed him." And they said, "How did you do that?" And he said, "I called upon the spirits." And of course they didn't ask. They went, "Spirits?" And I went, "Yeah, excuse me, what spirits?" You know, and they said they called upon the spirits of certain plants. And the guy actually had a bag, and he had plants in it. And he pulled out these plants, and he said, "These are my spirit guides, and they do everything." And he brings handfuls of these plants and some kind of flower and sticks it inside this little bag, and he calls upon the spirits, and he said he can see them go in and do the healing. And so I tried it with him. When he went into the altered state, I just mirrored him, across from him and had him do it again, and I went into the same state. And I have to admit, my state of consciousness was very altered. And then he started talking about how you could see these things. And I'm so suggestible, I saw them, but whether they were really there or whether I just saw them, I don't know. That would be too hard to say. I'm the kind of person, somebody handed me cough medicine once, and I started coughing. They said, "Here, hold this for a minute." And I looked at it and went, "Cough medicine." And I went, and then I read it had codeine in it. So bang, I drank some. And I have to admit, my cough went away, but then I didn't have one to start with. But see, to me, when people begin to ask, are spirits real? Are gods real? All of that stuff. Me, I believe everything, because I figure it's the best policy. That when you operate with doubt, you'll never find out about anything. That if you have to be sure of something before you try it, you'll never do anything new. If you had to be sure that you could ride a bicycle before you got on it, you would never start. Because when you first ride a bicycle, it's so awkward. You're trying to steer and balance and pedal all at the same time. But after you sort it out, it becomes something you become familiar with. I'm sure the same thing is true for people who engage in what they call primitive magic. I don't see it as that primitive because they do some really trippy stuff. There was one guy who was up the Amazon who had fabulous results with things that people weren't doing anything. He cured 3 cases of lung cancer in one day in the middle of a jungle without any medical equipment. I found that to be pretty amazing. And, he did it by giving people herbs and plants that were in the forest. I had somebody ask him, how did he know which plants to give to whom? And he said he asked the forest. I asked very specific questions. I had the guy go back. I had a rich guy that wanted some project to do, so I kept sending him out into the jungle with the snakes and stuff. I don't like to go myself anymore. It's like if there's no room service, I can live without it now. And sometimes, even with room service, I can live without it. Some places have the worst room service you can imagine. This place is pretty good. They have pretty good food, but I've been in some hotels and some places that, let's just say they get their food from the airlines. But anyway, I had him go and ask this guy, where do you ask the forest? Rather than what? Because I already knew what he asked the forest, but I just wanted to know if it mattered where he asked it. And he took this guy through the jungle, and he took him all the way around, and they hiked for 2.5 days, and then he took them to where there was this lagoon, and he went and stood on this tree, and he said, "This is where I asked him." So we had this radio telephone, this thing that goes through the satellites. You call anywhere in the world, and so he called me, and he said, "I'm at the place." And I said, "Well, good." I said, what I want you to do is to think of somebody who's got something, stand on the tree and ask a question and see what happens. So he went and stood on the bough of this tree, and he thought about this guy who had a skin disorder. And he was the guy that had flown him down there. And he went and thought about his skin disorder, and he asked the forest, and suddenly he got a picture of plants. He's a pretty good artist. He drew the plants. The shaman went into the forest, found the plants. They mixed up this stuff, put it on the pilot, and his skin rash went away. I mean, what can you say? So do we say that the forest has intelligence? If something the size of your brain can have intelligence, why couldn't a forest? I mean, to me, it's eminently plausible to say that they're the only thing that's conscious is the human brain is to be ignorant. I mean, this is what psychologists said about rats, that rats don't think. Well, it turns out that the rats do think, otherwise they wouldn't have been able to swim to the cheese. For us to say that we're the only consciousness and it only exists on this plane and in this dimension and it must be made out of carbon, it's just like people who say that, you know, they don't believe that there are other life forms in the universe. Excuse me, it's too big for there not to be other life forms. You know, I mean, the question is there intelligent life on this planet? I have some questions about that. Whether there's intelligent life off this planet, I have no question about. I mean, the universe is too immense for there not to be all kinds of wonderful, magical things. And I think the same thing is true, that in, quote, civilized society. I grew up in an inner city. So my being in touch with the planet is, you know, concrete. You know, I know lots about the city, but, you know, I had never been in these places. And as I started exploring the world, going to places where you're actually out in the elements, where you actually feel the rain, rather than see it out the window. And, you know, where smoke isn't something that you make, it's something that's just there in the forest by virtue of natural phenomenon. That, you know, instead of getting rid of smells, you participate in them. That people who are more in touch with those environments are going to know more about how to manipulate them. Some of it, I'm sure, is, you know, spiritual, and some of it, I'm sure, is hypnosis. But where one starts and the other stops, I don't know, and I don't know that it matters that we know. To tell you the truth, I think that, you know, my answer to all of these things is yes. I think that, you know, and whenever I work with somebody, I try to use everything. Somebody comes to me and they have a physical problem, I use hypnosis, I use acupuncture, I send them to an herbalist, I try everything. You know, I find the best Western doctors I can, hit them from every side. That's my policy. Give them everything you can and do everything you can. I mean, some of you know that it was about 3 years ago, my wife got a very rare disease, and it crippled her from the neck down. And the doctors explicitly said she would never walk again. Well, I guess she wasn't listening, because she walks now. And, you know, she's not going to run 25-mile marathon for at least a couple more years, but she's doing really well. And, you know, for a doctor to say that they explicitly know that people aren't going to get better, well, you can't always know that. You know, you have to count on this planet that wonderful, mysterious things happen. And if you don't try to participate in them, you may cut yourself off from them. This wonderful story somebody told me, I did a workshop, and I was talking about some of these things in London, and this woman came up to me and she said that, you know, I want to tell you about something that happened with my grandfather. He went to the hospital, and when he went to the hospital, because he was feeling badly, that he was so racked with cancer in his body that they just said, there's nothing we can do. And they sent him home. And the doctor said to his family, they said, well, should we tell him? And they said, there's not really anything that can be done. You know, you don't really need to say anything to him. And they gave him all this pain medication. which of course gets you high as a kite. But anyway, he was under a misimpression. He thought they sent him home because they cured him. So he went home and he didn't say anything. His family didn't say anything, and they kept sitting around, waiting for him to die. 17 years later, he did. I mean, they were talking weeks, and he was so convinced that he got better, he just went back and engaged in his life. He started going out and playing golf and doing all of this stuff and just ignoring the pain. And mysteriously, somehow or other, he got better. Now, I can't explain that either. But, you can say the spirits did it. You can say his state of consciousness did it. The truth is his beliefs did it. And whether his beliefs took advantage of spiritual things or not, who knows? For me, I'd say plan on having miracles, and you're more likely to. That certainly, they told me crazy stuff when I found out I was a diabetic. That I was in the hospital because I was misdiagnosed and I dropped into a coma, and I was taken to the hospital. And when I came out of the coma, they started telling me all of this crappy ass stuff that they tell you when you're sick. The first thing they did is they told me, for example, that I needed to quit smoking because being a diabetic, you have more problems with hardening of the arteries than a normal person. Plus, smoke doesn't mix with insulin very well. So I looked at the doctor and I said, okay, I quit. They gave me a good reason. I'd smoked for years, but I just said, okay, I quit. And the doctor looked at me and said, well, it's not going to be that easy. And I said, well, gee, I thought it was. So, you told me to quit. I'm convinced, so I quit. And they said, don't even think that way. And I said, excuse me? And they said, look, we'll get you some literature. So they went and they brought me a big stack of literature, right? And the literature literally laid out how you plan to quit smoking for a month before you even smoked one cigarette less. So I was going to have to start again because I quit. In my mind, I was done. That was it. So I said to the doctor, I said, this literature's wrong. I don't want this. I said, I quit. I said, I quit. I quit. That's all there is to it. I don't need this. And he looked me straight in the eye like a hypnotist, and he said, as soon as you eat a meal, you're going to crave a cigarette. And I went, me or you? And he went, I've never smoked. And I went, yet. I said, if he wants to play hypnosis, he's fucking with the wrong guy. At least we remember, I'm supposed to be the best hypnotist on the planet. You want to fuck with me? You try to put my ass in a trance, I'll kick your ass into a worse one. You put me in a good trance, I'll make you feel nice. But you try to make me feel bad, you're going to lose in the end. Remember, I know all about bad feelings. I've been studying how people do this for years, man. That poor doctor is not only smoking, he's depressed and suicidal. He's in existential crisis. He's sitting on the ledge of the hospital smoking a fucking cigar with a cigarette in the end of it, going to himself, why is life so fucked? You want to get that for me, please? What the fuck was that? Is that a cell phone? Doesn't sound like a cell phone. It sounds like an old telephone with a rotary dial. So we're moving way backwards. Anyway, it might be a good idea if when you come in here to turn your cell phones off, because if you guys just happen to be going into a trance, then when you leave here, cell phones are going to ring and you're going to drop back into trance. It could be dangerous. In fact, your cell phone could ring while you're driving and you might crash your car. Who knows? Every time you start to think about having sex, the cell phone will go off in your mind, and your penis will get the next instruction that the doctors gave me. You know what else they told me? They said, well, Dr. Bandler, I'm afraid we have to warn you that 80% of the people with diabetes suffer from impotence. And I said, well, I think I'll be part of the 20 then, thank you. And the doctor looked at me and he said, what, do you think you get to choose? And I said, yeah, of course I get to choose. And you better let me too. That's why he's out on the ledge now. That to me, that it just makes sense. If you're gonna, if the odds aren't good, if you have a 1 in 99 chance, be the one. The hell with the other 99 people. That's what I say. That if you begin to, because if you make yourself believe things 100%, the likelihood of them happening is so much more increased. The fact that every client that I met, I believed could be changed. So far, I've been, I think, pretty lucky because my clients have cooperated and changed. They sent me all kinds of people which were supposed to be impossible. These are people that were chronic, people that were given up on, people that had no hope. And I tried everything. I mean, I did every weird thing under the sun. Some of them, I just scared them out of it. I mean, there could be no other explanation. I had one guy who suffered from a lack of motivation. And he was actually sent by the Hasidic community in New York. And they had supported him through law school, and he didn't take the bar exam because he felt that since he was so intelligent, he should just study the Talmud, and his whole alarm would ring in the morning, and he'd look at it and then just go back to sleep. And the head of the Hasidic community called me up, and they don't normally talk to other people, but he said that he was just at a loss. They'd made a major financial investment in this guy, and he's supposed to give back to the community, and he's just a lazy bum. And he said, can there any way that you could possibly give him an ass kicking? And I thought, I can do that. So I got a couple of my friends from Israel who are commandos, retired commandos. And I mean, these guys are something else. To begin with, they're huge, they're fearless, and they will do anything. And I had these guys just sit behind me while I worked with this guy because I wanted his full attention, right? And he kept going, who are these guys? And I said, never mind. And I told him, I said that when he went back, I put him in a trance, and I told him, look, I said, when your alarm alarm goes off, you're going to just jump out of bed, or something mind-blowing is going to happen. And he lived in a security compound on the 22nd floor. And, you know, they have all these guys walking around with Uzis and stuff, completely secure complex. But his alarm goes off the next day, right? And he wakes up and he goes around and he goes to hit the snooze button, and as his hand comes down, another hand covers it. And it's one of these two guys, and there's one sitting on either side of the bed looking at him like this. And they both went, "Get up!" And he jumped out of bed and he ran into the bathroom and he opened the door and they were both gone. And there's only one way in and out of there, and they didn't go out, either of them. They never could figure out how they got in and out. But he called me on the phone and he said, "I want to know, were they really here or did I hallucinate them?" And I went, "Who?" And he went, "Those guys that were sitting behind you." And I went, "What guys?" And he went, "The two guys in the black shirts that were sitting behind you when I saw you." I said, "We were alone." And this voice that came through the phone that went, "Oh, shit." I said, "Do you need another session?" And he said, "No, I don't think so." I got a call from the head of the Hasidic community, and he said, "I don't know what you did with that guy, but can I send 3 more?" Sometimes you have to create your own ghosts. But we tried something, by the way. He was talking to me about they're developing something with a hospital. But we tried something in a hospital one time as an experiment, that since people are in the hospitals, they're kind of confined, you know. We thought, wouldn't it be cool if we made our own TV shows and only gave them like one channel, you know, the Richard channel? So we actually made our own soap opera. And we got like 15 people together, and we made a soap opera, and we made 5 episodes of it. And so that when the people would go in the hospital, that when they turn on the TV, there would be nothing on but this. So they would end up watching this over and over and over again. And of course, it was all of these people talking about hypnosis and health. And it took place, of course, where? In a hospital. Right? And we had all of these doctors going by, but we would actually insert it. We made it so that we could digitally go in and slice in their name so that the patient had the same name that they did, no matter who the patient was, which was funny because the patient was a woman and sometimes her name was Jim. But it didn't matter. The idea was that if we could give suggestions on an ongoing basis, and we even did the radio. We had our own radio, and we chose which songs that it played. And then in between, we had the DJ talking, so there was no escape. No matter what they did, they had radioed 93, Hypnosis Live. So they'd turn it on and we go, "Today what we want to do is we have a new product which is going to be really good for your health. It's called breathing. Every breath you take, if you put this air freshener in your room, every breath you take is going to make you healthier and happier, healthier and happier. You're going to find yourself healing." And then in the TV program we had, I did a thing. There's one session where they train a dog, because I like the thing where you just constantly go, "Heel." What's the command? Oh, I forgot. What was the word? Heel. And we just had this thing going back and forth. And then the dog would walk behind and stop and go, heel. And then get up and go, heel. So that constantly we were just inserting the word in there because we wanted to see if we could overcome some of the negative suggestions. I mean, when I think about the suggestions my doctor gave me, because he's required to by law, in California they have a law called informed consent, which means you have to tell the patients all the worst things that might possibly happen. And this is a law that was passed by the insurance companies. It has nothing to do with medicine. It only had to do with the insurance companies trying to protect themselves from things. So I taught this thing with doctors, and they said, what can we do about this? And I said, well, if you have to tell them everything that can happen, then fill in the possible medical things that might be negative outcomes, but tell them about all the other things that could go wrong too. You could be hit by an asteroid. I mean, that is one of the things that could happen during this operation. An asteroid could fly through the building, right through the ceiling, 3 stories down, and land right on the operating table and kill you dead. Now, once you tell them that, and then you say, well, sometimes under anesthesia, you get too much anesthesia and you choke to death and die. Or you get hit by an asteroid, one or the other. Somehow or other, people didn't have the negative responses that they could, because when people are frightened, just like the lady that I put in front of the audience, when people are frightened, they have a tendency to take things at face value. This is where, hello dear, we were just talking about you. Yeah, you must have known that. See, I told you, an asteroid just flies right through the ceiling, breaks through every floor and strikes me dead. See, she can't walk. What did I tell you? See, it just goes to show you how wrong doctors could be. For a while, my wife was in a wheelchair, but she found it too difficult to shop. So did you go out, or are you just about to, or what? What? It's shopping ends at 7:30 tonight? Just in case I was worried about how long the stores were open. Well, thank you, dear. I feel so relieved now. So I take it that means we're going out for the ring, huh? I told you guys. That's what it's all about, the ring. It's kind of like Lord of the Rings, only more often. Anyway, it's a beautiful ring. I agree. And anything you say, dear, I have responded. That's what Milton used to do, by the way. Milton used to do that with his wife. Yeah. Milton he had, when he was in his office, he wanted his wife, he goes, Betty, I want you to come in here for a minute. And she'd come in and she'd go, what is it, Milton? And he goes, I want you to demonstrate self-hypnosis. She goes, oh, Milton, I'm very busy. And he'd go, the ring. And she would go, yes, Milton. Do anything he said. I try it and I go like this. I go, Paula, the ring. I guess I got something wrong in that, you know. Anyway, so those were the 3 questions that I got. But see, to me, it's more about keeping in mind that no matter what you do, the trick is to be able to realize that whatever response you have is a response that you can change. And I want to prove it to you by having you do a little exercise, okay? And just something I want you to try with one another. What I want you to do is that little thing with the submodalities that's in the book. Did you guys find that? That is in there, right? By the way, this is yes, this is no. You guys got a book? Isn't there a list of submodalities? Ronnie, where are you? Yes. Okay. What page is that? Okay, on page 10 in there, there's a list of submodalities. Trust me, it's in there. You don't, you know. Anyway, here, why don't you let me see that, sir. I'll tell you what I want you to do with this. What I want you to do is I want you to go through, and I want you to have the person think of a time they were really relaxed, okay? And have them see what they saw when they were there, hear what they heard, and then I want you to go through these things and see if you can like turn the brightness up and have the person hold out their hand in front of them. And if making it brighter makes them relax more, have their hand go up. And if it makes them relax less, have their hand go down. And then go back and then try turning the sound up and down. Make the picture bigger, make it smaller, make it closer, make it farther away, so that you begin to try all of these submodalities so that you can make the most relaxed state that you can. Now, each time their hand goes up, I want you to mark it on their knee. Be very specific. So you start here on their knee, and each time it's going up, just make it so it slides a little bit. So that, in fact, every time you touch them there, they begin to become relaxed. Now, after you run through these, then you have a nice little anchor that you can fire off to make them feel relaxed. What I want you to do is I want you to do the following. I want you to ask them to think about something where they go into stress. Ask them what stresses you out. And as they start to think about it, I want you to fire this anchor off. And then tell them, the more you start to get tense, the more it will relax you. Because just think, if tension makes you relax, how much healthier you would be as an individual and how many more choices you would have. It's kind of the sneaky approach. And it's also a good chance for you guys to do a little catch-up here, because I have some weird things I want to try tomorrow, and I want you to be a little more familiar. Now, let me ask you, how many of you have done things with submodalities before? Okay? Look around. If your hand is not up, pick one of the people whose hand is up as a partner. That'll make this go very, very fast. So those of you who have done stuff with submodalities, raise your hand. Hold it up there like this so they can look. Now, the rest of you pick one of these people and work with them. That'll make it go really fast, so it won't take that long. Take about 10 minutes apiece and meet me back here, okay? Go. So how'd you guys do? Good? Of course it works. I knew that, or I wouldn't ask you to do it in the first place. The question is, can you guys get it to work? I know how to make it work, but then I can get the square peg in the round hole. Just takes a little time and a little force. Okay, why don't you just go ahead and close that? And yeah, that's good. We'll lock them out. Anyway, before we finish this evening, there's a couple of other things that I wanted to go through. You guys are late. You're not supposed to seem so happy about it. Here I'm trying to make you feel bad, and you're just smiling in my face, you know. You're not supposed to grin up at me and go, yeah. See, this is the trouble. You start getting people to relax, and the next thing you know, they start breaking rules, start having a good future, start making more money, having better relationships. Then what will I do for a living? You know. Of course, once you can take away problems, you can always reinstall them. That's not too big a problem. I had one psychiatrist that came and studied with me for about a year, and then he came up to me and he said he was losing his clients. And I said, what do you mean you're losing your clients? And he said, well, my clients are getting better. They're not coming back. And I said, well, you need to get new ones. I said, it's not like there's a shortage of lunatics on this planet. This I can guarantee you. All you have to do is watch the news. I mean, they're just doing such nutty stuff all over the place. Did you guys see where in Thailand they decided to move a munitions dump? And somebody dropped one of these big 3-inch shells, and it set off the munitions, and it blew up for 4 or 5 hours, all of these things. And they were worried because it blew up all these houses because they put the munitions dump in a residential neighborhood. Now, what rocket scientist figured that out? Has to be the same one as in the United States that had us, when I was growing up, at least every 2 weeks, they'd fire this siren off, and we'd all have to climb under our desk to hide from nuclear warfare. Now, I don't know what scientists decided that we would be able to protect ourselves from nuclear bombs. I lived across the street from Lockheed, Fairchild, Ames Research, Moffett Field. We were at ground point zero, yet we were climbing under our desks in case a nuclear bomb went off. The logic that they use, by the way, to justify this is that if an atomic warhead goes off, the first thing that happens is a great wind comes along and blows glass out. And they didn't want anyone to be injured by glass before they were evaporated. Now, given that this comes from the greatest minds in my country, I thought perhaps there's a lot of room left for improvement. That for me, that the one thing that most people don't do is they don't give their brain a chance to exercise its capabilities. Your ability to be creative, your ability to try new things, your ability to be able to relax in spite of the fact that living is a stressful business. That, you know, I mean, there's lots of bad drivers on the road. There are lots of incompetent people working everywhere. I went into a store the other day. I bought 4 things, and it took the person 30 minutes to add them up on the cash register. And they were just miffed. They kept looking at it and turning it upside down, right side up, turning it this way, turning it that way, and then they took the scanner and went across it. I mean, why didn't they just put the scanner across it? The scanner doesn't care what direction it's pointing in. But for some reason, they were convinced that they had to look at it first, like somehow or other their brain was going to make it easier to read. That was a good idea. Huh. Was the cold bothering you? Yeah. Then you should have closed it all the way. I said you should have closed it all the way. That way it wouldn't bother you anymore. This way it's going to get there. It's just going to take longer. Anyway, I wanted you to take a few moments. I want you to sit back. I want you to put your feet on the floor. And I want you to just stop for a moment. And I want you to start to consider that we have a couple of days left that we can do anything we want. Okay, I spent 30 years figuring out how to bend people from schizophrenia to sanity, how to bend people from being so professional that they were incompetent into being able to do things. I took on the entire field of psychology and won. Because now there's hardly a school in the face of the earth that does not teach the techniques that I've developed in the past 30 years. That I'm even in philosophy 101 books in the U.S. I think that's pretty cool. I come right after Gregory Bateson, which is, I guess, where I belong. But, you know, even though I didn't set out to create a philosophy, now I have. Which is hard to understand because I don't believe in anything that would get in my way. That's my philosophy. My philosophy is that, in essence, everything is just a way of talking about things. That to me, that theories about knowledge and all these concepts and complicated things, I was a mathematician, I was trained as a physicist. And what physicists have learned is that when you get inside of the atom, we find particles, and when you get inside the particles, you don't find nothing. You find a lot of smoke and mirrors and no smoke and no mirrors. But yet, somehow or other, reality manages to stay in the same shape. But you see, when it comes to ideas, people begin to act as if ideas are real. And this is what it all boils down to, that when people came in and said, I have depression, they were acting as if it was a thing, almost a mantle. Part of the reason I was able to scare the one woman out of her depression was that I shocked her into an altered state, and then I wouldn't let her out of it. See, what happened was, since nobody really listened to her, they never realized that they just classified it as depression because she wasn't having fun. But there's lots of ways to not have fun, and they're different from one another. If you can find out how people are doing things, you can always find a way to make the same process useful. The same way that she was able to scare herself over time becomes the same way by which she can make it so that not only is she not scared, she can have fun. See, to me, it's not enough to just erase things. This is one of the problems with the field of psychology, is they try to get you to overcome your stress rather than make it the source of relaxation. That as soon as you realize it's the same process, it's the process of using your mental ideas, the pictures and the words, to be able to create feelings. Because in essence, you haven't explored the range of experiences that you're capable of on any level. Your endocrine system is able to create much more intense states of bliss than you spend much time in. And in a lot of ways, that's good, because if you were blissed out while you were driving on the Autobahn, probably you would get blissed out for good. That to me, well, it's the case, you know, you don't want to be in nirvana state when you're driving a car. You want to be alert so that you don't just drive off the road and into the ravine. And the whole time going, we are one, everything is everything. You know, the only difference is when they go down, they go, oh. See, I met lots of these, quote, enlightened beings. And I was very fortunate in my career that, you know, I've met most of the real geniuses of the last generation. That once I started modeling people, it was odd how suddenly all of these brilliant people got mad that I hadn't modeled them. So suddenly I got a summons to go meet Linus Pauling. And he said, you know, I'm one of the great minds. How come I'm not on your list? You know, and I went, well, you are on the list. I just hadn't met you. And he said, well, go ahead. You've met me. Model me. And I'd go, okay. I said, when you think about chemistry, how do you do it? And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, let's take something. I mean, in order for you to think about a double helix, what do you do? And he said, well, a double helix is really quite simple. The first thing you do is imagine a mirror. Now, I never really thought about imagining a mirror that wasn't there, but, you know, me, I'm easy. I went, okay, and I'm combing my hair like this. And he said, now, put a helix molecule in front of it, and then turn it towards the mirror, and watch the reflection of it in the mirror. That's the only way that you can understand a double helix molecule. Well, I took chemistry in school. They never told us that at all. They showed us pictures of what it wasn't. They said, well, this is a helix molecule, but this is two-dimensional. Think of it as three-dimensional. And I went, yeah, right. So I said to myself, it's three-dimensional. And nothing happened. That's why I wasn't really that great of a chemist, which the chemistry department will verify for you if you contact the university. That little burnt field that's on the side as you come in used to be the chemistry department. See, I have this problem. The other thing about having a wanton sense of exploration means that I also am prone to make mistakes. But you see, my theory is if you make enough mistakes and you notice it, eventually you're going to find the right course. If you just make the same mistake over and over again, you become numb, you become deaf, you become blind. What I want you to do is to sit back for a moment, take a deep breath, close your eyes, and consider that tonight, while you sleep and dream, you're going to engage in the natural process of integration. This is the chance for the unconscious portion of each of both of you to begin to take the things that it's heard. Because while you've been listening consciously, not everything I've said to you is for your conscious mind. Many of the things that I've said to you is for the unconscious portion of you to begin to let go of the rigid beliefs that get in your way and begin to soften. And to begin to soften both your ideas, to soften your beliefs, and to soften your skin. Because at one time when you were very young, you didn't have enough beliefs so that you limited yourself. You let your imagination see things that weren't there. I know that many of you had an imaginary friend or an imaginary pet. And yet, as you got older, you gave up those, quote, childhood things. But it also meant you closed down your senses to so many things that you missed the obvious. This is the way psychologists missed accessing cue. While Freud was trying to interpret dreams, he didn't watch the eye movements of the people in front of them. He didn't listen to the predicates of their language. He was busy looking for the fish in their dreams. Years and years ago, a psychoanalyst, actually two of them, brought to me a client in which they told me they didn't want me to do anything to help the client, that they were doing something that was more important. They were writing papers which they were both going to submit, in which they both had different opinions about the etiology of their problem, that is, where their problem began. And the one psychologist told me that he knew that this woman was stuck at the breastfeeding developmental stage. And the reason that she had a phobia of the sound of gum chewing was because that she was stuck at this stage of development, and that the sound of breastfeeding was much like the sound of gum chewing. And I guess he doesn't suck on breasts quite the same way I do, because it doesn't sound like that to me. But he was convinced, and when I asked him, I said, "How do you know this?" And he said to me in all seriousness, he looked at me and he said, "Because of the fish in her dreams." That cleared it right up, I have to tell you. Now this is a guy who went to college until he became somebody with a BA, or in his case, probably a BS. And then he was somebody that got a master's in science. Then he got a PhD. Then he went to medical school. Then he did years of residency. This guy didn't get out of college till he was in his 30s. So with all this educational, he looks at me and says, because this woman has fish in her dreams, this is why she has a phobia of the sound of gum chewing. The other psychiatrist said to me something equally as stupid. He told me that obviously she had walked in on her parents having sex and was traumatized by this, repressed it back into her memory, and later on this emerged by symptom substitution to be a complex which developed into her neurotic behavior, where she had this phobia which expressed itself every time she heard the people chewing gum. And I asked him, I said, "Well, how do you know this?" And he said, well, this client has a free associated on my couch for over 5 years. I've listened to the complex, deeper meanings of the things that she has said about gum chewing, and repeatedly, when she had talked about how surprised she was, associating the accident of the complex, deeper meanings of the things that she has said about gum chewing. And repeatedly, when she had talked about how surprised she was, associating the accident of being surprised with the accident of walking in our parents having sex, obviously this is where the trauma began. And I said to myself, what a crop of horseshit. And I looked at the woman and I said, I don't know where you got your phobia. I said, but these guys don't want me to fix it because they're writing papers on you. And I said, but lucky for you, I never do what I'm told. They only said that the symptoms still had to exist. They didn't say in whom. You guys see this one coming? Well, so Richard began to put her in a trance, and lo and behold, the others in the room went into a trance as well. And the deeper she went, the deeper they went. And I looked at her and I told her to really go back. Go back deep into your unconscious and to let the problems that you have go to where they should be. And so the problems floated out of her, and they floated into psychiatrists, where they could be more useful and they could write papers about them for the rest of their life. And I said, but just out of curiosity, I want your unconscious to go back and to find out what the root cause of this is. Not that it really matters, because you're never going to have to do this again. And suddenly she opened her eyes and she looked at me and she said, my dad used to chew tobacco. He held me off a ski lift because he didn't want me to be afraid. And all I could hear is that smacking of the gum chewing. And she said, I guess that's why gum chewing scares me. And I looked at her and I said, scared you? Scared you. Past tense. And I told her I wanted her to think about the sound of gum chewing. And at that moment, I reached over and fired off an anchor I had made for her to relax. And she said, well, I can hear the sound of gum chewing, but I'm not afraid. And I went, and suddenly the two psychiatrists became totally frightened. And the woman began to laugh. And I began to laugh. Because if you look at the humor and the fact that we build such silly problems, such silly things frighten us, we become afraid. There are women that look in the mirror and they go, my breasts are too small. Too small for what? You know, they seem to be just fine. But if you want to change the size, remember, your brain is capable of doing that. They've been doing breast enlargement with hypnosis for over 2,000 years. So, you know, but of course they don't tell you that when you go for plastic surgery. They tell you the best way to change your beauty is with a knife. I happen to think if you want to look better, leave the knives alone. You know, maybe a little makeup, a little rest, you know, maybe some positive thinking. But I've noticed that whether you're a man or whether you're a woman or whether you're confused about that, it doesn't matter. The happier you are, the better you look. So the trick is to be happier more of the time. So tonight, while you sleep and dream, I want the unconscious portion of each of both of you to lock onto that idea and to go through and to begin to root out all of those things that you feel bad about too much of the time. And all it needs to do is to begin to rewind them. Start at the end, move towards the beginning. Because anything you think about that bothers you, if you start at the end and run it so that people walk backwards, talk backwards, throw in a little circus music. It's just hard to be feeling bad when you have circus music and Charlie Chaplin walking backwards and your head moon dancing. It's just not the same thing. But it also does something at the neurological level. At the neurological level, what it does is it begins to flatten out the neurons, because most of us are designed to run our memories forward. And if instead of doing that, you run your memories backwards, so that you begin to think differently, so that you begin to really let yourself have a chance to relax away all the things that you might worry about, and give yourself a chance to let the inner part of you, which is beautiful, come out. Because if you spend more and more of your day feeling better and better, what's bound to happen is that you're bound to look prettier. You're bound to feel better, and you're bound to have more creative ideas, and you're bound to find more solutions where things seem to be impossible. And you'll begin to find that your creativity is going to flow. So tonight, while you sleep and dream peacefully, I want you to rest deeply, but I want you to go deeper sleep that you normally go. If you only for a moment let your conscious mind slip off. And just like most of you are able to decide what time you're going to wake up in the morning, you set your alarms and you wake up just before they go off. This is a universal of human experience. It only means that even while you're deep asleep, your conscious mind can program you to wake up out of that sleep. Even if you just program yourself to wake up when the alarm goes off. You know, there's nothing that says you have to. My son certainly doesn't. You can put all the alarms in the world in there, he'll never wake up. He's slept above my recording studio for years. You can drop an anvil next to the bed and he won't wake up. But if you whisper, "You're gonna be late," bang, that's the point that he gets it. You see, it doesn't take a loud noise. It only takes the right words in the right place at the right time to begin to change your experience. It only takes the right picture in the right place, moving in the right direction, to begin to program your future so that you can do better things. It only takes the right words at the right time for you to begin to feel differently about anything about yourself. Because whatever it is about yourself that you feel badly about, you've done it enough. It's now time to just remember the second mantra. Lighten the fuck up. Lighten the fuck up. Because, you see, it's the inner delight that you're capable of feeling. That if you look at something about yourself and feel bad, that's just something you learn to do. You can also learn to begin to realize that you are an individual on this planet. There is nobody else like you. Nobody's got the same fingerprints. Nobody has the same footprints. And the reason you have different footprints is the planet is keeping track of you. It knows where you are, and it knows what you've been doing. It's kind of like Santa Claus. And if you literally open up your mind and begin to draw energy from the earth, you'll feel better. If when you breathe, you feel happy, and when you eat and take in nourishment, you feel happy, happy rather than letting your thoughts worry about little tiny insignificant things. What's going to happen is you're going to find that inner vibrance that separates the special people from the people who live in misery and they don't need to. Remember, your life could be so much worse. And if you keep practicing bad thoughts, it will be. On the other hand, there's enough to deal with in reality, and it's not that bad things won't ever happen. I don't care whoever promises you that. No one of us know the future. Things will happen. The question is, are you going to learn from them, and are you going to dwell on them? Because if it's time to move on and to try new states and to realize being alive is a wondrous process, and whether or not it's the spirits or whether or not it's the hypnosis or whether or not it's evocation or invocation, the thing you have to keep in mind is if you get high with hypnosis, you won't have a hangover. So in a moment, let your eyes open. Hello. And remember, come back at 10 o'clock tomorrow. Wide awake, alert, and ready for new things. I will see you tomorrow. Have a good night.